Hello, and welcome to our web series, Structure of a JIRA Project. And today we're going to cover a very important topic. We're going to talk about permissions. So we've done all these fancy things with issue types, workflows, screens, and fields. But now you need to get the users in there to actually use these things that you've set up. Well, the most important thing is having the correct permissions and knowing how to have those permissions set up for best practice. We're going to talk about how to set this up in a company managed project first, and then we'll talk about how to do it in a team managed project, as there are some differences. So you'll see here we are at the summary screen for our demo that we've been in since the beginning. You'll see issue types here, which we talked about, workflows, screens, and fields, which we have covered. This has all been on the left hand side. Let me take you to the other side, known as the right hand side. And this you'll see here is permissions. There's a little description on what permissions do. A quick overview of what permissions are. Permissions are what gain users access to the project, allow users to actually view the tickets, allow users to create the tickets, work the tickets. And when I say work the tickets, I mean move them through a status, comment on the ticket, and basically get that ticket to the end cycle. Let's go inside and look at what a permission scheme looks like. You'll see here, it'll list this permission scheme. It'll also list issues. Don't worry about those issues right now. That's for a different time. We're going to click on this permission scheme. You're going to get a brand new tab that opens up here. And on here, it's going to show you a whole bunch of information. On the left-hand side, you have your permissions. You'll see there's administer projects, browse projects, manage sprints, etc., etc., etc. And on the right-hand side is where you can see who has those permissions, whether it be users, groups, or project roles. Spoiler alert, best practice, you don't want to have users set in your permission scheme. And we'll talk about that in the next episode, but we will touch on it here a little bit. So let's take a look at what these permissions mean and what these permissions are. Now, I'm not going to cover every single permission. As you can see, there's quite a few here, and a lot of them are very specific to your use. But I'm going to talk about the major ones that are getting users into the project, working in the project, viewing the project, and also adminning the project, which is the first one we're going to talk about here. You'll see this permission for administer projects. This is going to allow what we call a project admin to be able to update certain things within the project. That will come in a later series as well. So keep watching here to see when you find out what all those project admin things are. Browse projects, that's going to give your users the ability to browse the project. If you have a user coming to you and saying, hey, I can't find this project, most likely they don't have the browse project permission. Manage sprints, this is going to allow your users to manage sprints. That means updating sprint start dates, end dates, and things within the sprint board. Another big area is the issue permissions. You'll see here there's an assignable user. If you want a user to be available in the user picker, they need to have the permission to be an assignable user. Along with, if you want them to be able to assign an issue, they need to have that specific permission. And you'll see a whole bunch of these here. Create issues, that's another big important one. You can view the project, but if you don't have create issues permission, you can't create an issue. So this is going to be your first place that you want to look at when you have a user saying, I can't do this in the project, I can't do that in the project. We'll keep scrolling down and you'll see that there's a lot. I encourage you to come back and review these permissions and make the correct updates as needed. Now, I say make the updates, but how do you do that? What do you do with that? You'll see up here in the top right hand corner, we have this thing called actions. There's two things that we could do here, and we're going to focus on the editing permissions. Within here, you can look at the current permissions and who that permission is granted to, and it will break it down by project role, group, and if there's users listed in here, it will have the user listed. Once again, can't stress enough, you don't really want to have a user in here specifically. Best practice, and this is where I will go on my little spiel about best practice with permissions, is you either want to use a group or a project role. The reason you want to use one of those two is a group, you can manage that outside of JIRA, so that way it's automatically adding and removing users and isn't reliant upon just a JIRA admin. With roles, a project admin is able to update the users within that project role so that they can grant and take away access as needed. You can also use groups and project roles, but you have to wait until next episode to find out more about that. So in here, let's take a look at the Browse Projects. If I were to click this Update button, I can select who I want to grant this access to. I can go to a project role, and here I could say I want developers to have it. You'll see that there is a random list of project roles in here, and once again, next episode we'll cover that a little bit more. I'll select Update, and you'll see developers are there now. I can also take away permissions as long as I'm a JIRA admin. And all you have to do, select that check mark and hit remove. You can also grant permission in a bulk way by selecting the grant permission button. And then from here, you could just kind of select everything you want that project role or that group, or even application access. And what I mean by application access, do they have application access to JIRA software, or do they have application access to JIRA Service Desk? This meaning anyone that has a JIRA software license is granted that permission. Along with that, any logged in user. And what I mean by that, if they are logged into JIRA, they are able to have those permissions for that specific project, whether it be browse a project, create issues, etc., etc. Also, there's this option public. And as you see here, when I select public, there comes the warning lights. If your instance is viewable by the public, this means anyone in the entire universe could look at your project. I ask that you take extreme caution when using public, and if it's not needed, then don't use it. There's one other area I want to talk about in the company managed project with permissions before we move on to the team managed project. Next thing I'll mention is this permission helper. In my 11 to 12 years of JIRA admin experience, this permission helper has been a time saver. You may get a ticket in, or you may get an email, or you may get a walk by at your desk saying, hey, I can't do this. Well, with the permission helper, you can go exactly to the user. You can type in a ticket. You can also then add in what the permission would be. Maybe they say, hey, I can't assign any issues. You can click submit, and it's going to tell you whether or not they actually have permission to be doing what they're asking to do. If not, then you know that it is a permission issue. If it shows up that everything is working correctly, that means you need to look a little bit deeper. There may be something different going on. So that's how you take care of permission schemes in a project, in a company managed project in JIRA. Next, let's shift gears over to a team managed project. Now this is going to be a little bit different, as everything kind of is with the team managed projects. So let's go ahead and get to it. So we see here that we're at our detail screen on our team managed project. We're going to select access. And you'll see here, this looks different, but it will look familiar if you watch the next episode. In here, you're going to see that there's a couple of things that add for access to the project. It does not look like the project permission scheme that we just looked at. Everything in a team managed project is a little bit higher level to make it easier for end users to manage. So the first thing let's look at is this project access. You'll see here that this project is currently set to private. And what that means is only admins and people that you can add to the project can search, view, create, or edit issues. Let's take a look at if we hit change access. You'll also see that there's then limited. And what limited does is anyone that has access to the site can do a search, view, and comment on the issues. And you see here with open, if they have access to your JIRA site, they can search and view, create, and edit the project's issues. With limited, you do have to add them to it to be able to create and edit issues. So that's the difference there. So just keep that in mind. And it does a really good job of course, telling you what those differences are. So that's just access to the project in general. Let's look at this next part of adding someone. You'll see here it shows me with my email address and my role. My current role is I'm an administrator, which means I can do pretty much everything I want to. But what do these other roles mean? You have administrator, member, and viewer. So like we mentioned, administrator, you can do pretty much everything within the project, setting up rules, adding other admins, you can manage features, customize your issue types, add rules to the board. One thing is you're going to want to have JIRA software access to get the full benefits of being an admin in that project. The next one is member. And what members can do, they're part of a team, if you think about it. You can create issues, edit comments, move the issues into different statuses, and basically do what you could do in a JIRA ticket normally as a member or an agent or just someone on the team. With this role, you'll also want to have JIRA software license to really get the full benefit of the role. And then viewer, that pretty much means what it says, viewer. You can search and view issues in the project, but there's not much else you can do. And it doesn't matter if you have JIRA software license access or not, you're just viewing the tickets, you're not interacting with the tickets. So let's go ahead and pretend to add someone. We're going to add me to another role because why not? So what you're going to do is you're going to type in a name and you're going to select it. So you'll see here as well, in case you don't remember what these roles mean, there's also a breakdown of these roles so you know what permissions you're granting to your project. You're going to select member, add. It's going to refresh and you'll see since I was already on here, it's going to show that I have more than one role. So this is how you control your access, the permission to a team managed project. It is quite a bit different than a company managed project, but it still kind of has some of the same notes. So if I could leave you with anything today, when you're working in a company managed project on the permissions, I ask that you use user roles and groups and not individual users. And make sure if you're not certain if someone should have that permission, don't add it until it seems like it's something that they fully need. I want to thank you for joining me today in our web series, Structure of a JIRA Project. Today we've gone over permission schemes in company managed projects and team managed projects. Be sure to stay tuned for our next episode where we'll talk about user roles. I thank you for joining us and look forward to seeing you on the next one.